Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky. Alongside me, Dwight Brown, co-host. Hey, Dwight.
Hey, David. How's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
I am great.
That's great. And today we have a very special guest, Martine Kalaw from Martine Kalaw Enterprises, CEO and founder. Hello, Martine. How are you?
Hi, David. How are you? Hi, Dwight.
Hi, Martine.
Very good. We are so excited to talk to you today, Martine. But Martine, can you give us a little bit of background as to who you are and how you got to this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I'm CEO and founder of Martine Kalaw Enterprises, which is a boutique firm that supports human resources professionals in making DEI accessible in their workplaces. Because we know that oftentimes with this push for DEI in workspaces, usually the person that gets targeted with that responsibility is the HR professional. And sometimes they don't feel like they have the experience, the expertise, and they feel like it's burdensome. So what I want to do, we like to do at Martine Kalaw Enterprises is support them so that they can position DEI as a business case and secure a seat at the table when pushing DEI forward.
Outstanding.
And as far as how I got into this, for personal and professional reasons and my journey, I've considered myself a bridge builder, someone who has had access to different communities and spaces and has sort of integrated myself in different communities and spaces. And what I've realized is that there is an unspoken understanding across many communities and spaces. And those that have more access sometimes see those that don't as charity, and that's not the case.
Right.
I think there's value in building those bridges so that everyone sees each other as an investment, right? People, human capital investment, and that can impact and grow communities. And so that's what I like to do, whether it's philanthropic work, whether it's, for-profit work, it's building those bridges so that people see the value that each other can bring to the table.
I wish people saw DE&I as a bridge building business issue, rather than being people of color versus white or age or gender. I wish they saw it as a way of coming together and making the company stronger.
Yeah. And that's really what it is. And when people ask me, well, what is DEI? What's the purpose of it? I say in the workspace. I really think that DEI in the workspace is a microcosm of the world and the nation, right? Everyone in the nation, everyone in the world goes to work, and we can't get it right socially. But when we come to work, we can really, kind of navigate through this. And it's an inside out approach as opposed to an outside in approach in really affecting DEI. And at the end of the day, it becomes an opportunity for us to really drive business. So ultimately what I say is, DEI is about widening our pool, identifying the best, smartest, top talent, bringing them into our organization, right? And when we widen the pool as far as we can, we mitigate bias, we automatically increase diversity. We bring those people in, we retain them and make sure that they feel included, and we drive the business. Our numbers go up. That's what DEI is meant to be.
And we're going to get into that in much more detail.
Yeah, good.
But first, Martine, we need to know one thing that no one knows about you.
Oh, man. Okay. Look, I'll say this. I'll start with this one. I am an open book, literally and figuratively. So my first book was a memoir. So in that case, I am an open book. There's very little that people don't know about me. But Right now, I think very few people, if anyone, knows that I'm 5 months pregnant. And in August, end of August, I will be having my first baby. Thank you.
Hey,
oh,
congratulations.
Wow, that's so wonderful.
Thank you.
Oh, well,
that's excellent.
That is a first
here on the show.
That is absolutely a first.
Look at that.
I like to be original.
We are better than CNN or Fox or anything. Yeah. We've got
breaking news.
We've got the breaking news here.
Breaking news.
Rihanna. Like Rihanna's got nothing on me.
It'll be out on Newswire after we finish hitting the record button. Yeah. Wow. Gosh. That's wonderful. Congratulations. As we are both parents, so we know the experience you're going to go through, not from your side of it, obviously, from the other side, but enjoy your sleep now while you can, first. And second, enjoy your partner while you can. Because it is going to be
him again, right?
Wow. Well, if that's what your hope is, then
exactly. Maybe that's a good thing for you.
No, that's not the hope. That's not the hope. But no. And the thing about sleep is people say enjoy your sleep, but it's like, well, you can't like save sleep. Like even if I sleep now, I'll still be tired later, right?
Yes, you will. But it changes. But from now on, and this is where I'm going with this, from now on, you will never sleep the same. I mean, I'm not talking about like the early years when you have to nurse and things like that. I'm talking about, the kid running into your bedroom at 5 o'clock in the morning going, mommy, mommy, mommy.
I won't. And I love to sleep. So I will.
Well,
I will
forget about that. maybe you shouldn't sleep now. Maybe that's the point. Maybe you should get used to it from now.
Right. Acclimate your body to it.
Man.
No, that's so wonderful. Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That is an absolute blessing.
Thank you.
So our topic for today is DE&I is inevitable. And one of the notes you have in here is that by 2032, people of color will be the majority in the U.S. labor force. And organizations have to get ahead of that curve. And I totally agree with you on that. So this should be a fascinating conversation because we talk a lot about DE&I. We talk a lot about demographics and data.
Yep.
So we're fascinated, riveted.
I am too.
So the first question is, what type of data do you need to actually drive DE&I in the workplace?
This is William Tincup, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Indeed FutureWorks. Ryan and I attended the conference last year, and we created a limited series for Indeed where we talked to their customers. Great stories around TA and how they use Indeed to the max. So check it out. It's just Indeed FutureWorks 2024. You could search for it wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll start with the first because I think there are a lot of misconceptions when people think about data. The first is targets, not quotas, in my opinion. Lots of organizations are caught up with the idea and the concept of quotas. And then I think that's where they get stuck, right? We need that data. We need the quota so that we can work against it or work towards it. And there's a level of force. It feels very punitive and it really does stifle the organization. It actually does more harm than good. I think quotas work in different environments. In the academic institution, it was designed for that for specific reasons. In the workplace, I say targets. Targets look a lot different than quotas, right? So that's the first piece of data. The second is the demographic data, the demographics of your employee base, your employee population. It's really important to start looking at like those fundamental, demographics, whether it's race, ethnicity, gender, etc., like looking at it across the board. And some of this information, like they don't always have it or it's not consistent, especially when they're a global organization. So you want to find metrics that are consistent across the board, right? So if you have race in the United States, and then let's say you have an office in Germany or in Bulgaria and you have ethnicity, you want to make sure that you're able to like set it up so that you're able to create like that common denominator. The third piece of data that I would say is important is the intersectionality of the data, right? So it's one thing to just look at gender. It's another thing to look at race and look at all of that across the board. And by the way, when you do that, you use the national averages or global averages as a framework, a basis of comparison, right? But in addition to that, if you really want to be able to tell a story and see what the story is and how you want to, where there's opportunity to grow, you want to be able to look at the intersection of data. So, for example, you might be looking at the gender distribution within an organization. But what's more important is to look at it across departments. And then when you look at it across department, that might be the first layer, but that doesn't really tell you much. So then you want to look at gender and maybe ethnicity. That's the second layer. And then the third layer might be gender across ethnicity across like tenure, right? Because then you're able to see and deduce a story that will help to drive diversity initiatives.
I think the sensitivity about the word quota came from the affirmative action programs, which enforced for government contractors a specific mix of people. And there was a knee-jerk reaction to that. So I think a lot of us who are older remember that time when we used to have that, and what I consider overreactions, by the way, to what were termed quotas, but you're spot on with the word target, because target sets a goal for enabling an organization to shoot for. The other thing I wanted to talk about, because I totally agree on your data point, you won't get any arguments here, but the last piece that you mentioned in the intersectionality is that we also can look at the populations that you have been recruiting from and the populations you have not been recruiting from. So if you haven't been targeting where you could find people of color or people of different gender, those particular areas that are strong with great talent, then maybe you're not actually doing the best thing for your recruiting program.
That's correct.
And then being able to find not just the diverse talent, but diverse thought. The last thing I wanted to ask is that, do you also find it difficult because they're recruiting into positions that instead of recruiting for all positions, they're just focusing on things like graduates. And so they're not thinking about the entire stack of positions. So I had three reactions there. Sorry to kind of put it all together.
And let me know if I missed any of your questions or comments. Absolutely. The goal is for organizations to widen their networks. And that has a lot to do with the talent acquisition team itself has to have a level of diversity and representation to be able to tap into different networks, to even know what they don't know, you know, their wider networks. And then when they do that, I think a lot of misconceptions that organizations have is diversifying our pool of candidates means that the quality of candidates go down. And that is not the truth, right? I'm not suggesting that you stop recruiting from the pool that you already have. What I'm suggesting is you widen the pool. So you look at other networks that you haven't, navigated and accessed before, right? And when you do that, you're going to find the top talent in all these different networks. And that's not just at HBCUs, because by the way, I like to look at historically Black colleges and universities that are not at the top, like, they're like a select Ivy HBCUs, but then there are other HBCUs that never get, any notoriety. There are institutions that have African-American Black students that are not HBCUs, right? And then there are Hispanic serving institutions. There are all these other institutions. So the key is to tap into as wide of a network. And when we do that and we bring in qualified candidates, and we add them to our existing pool, and we mitigate the bias.
Totally agree.
What was your second? I think you had a second question or comment.
Well, it was also about the fact that targets are better because it enables companies to have a goal to shoot for rather than quotas, which had always had that negative connotation for the wrong reasons. So,
and there's a reason for quotas in some institutions, in academic and government institutions, but that it's completely different industry, different space than the for-profit or even not-for-profit space, right? And so I think that, like, again, quotas feel punitive. It feels like, it forces or enforces this idea of tokenism, of bringing a person in and sets them up for failure, right? But when we have targets, it's very consistent with business practices. We have targets for our sales, we have targets for whatever other initiatives, our products. So it's very consistent with the language that organizations have. And so that's what we want. We want DEI to be positioned as a business practice and system.
to go back to your original point about the data driving the DEI in the workplace, there is a lack of understanding about what is the appropriate data. And I think you carefully talked about making sure that you not only have a handle on what you have, but especially if you're a global company, making sure there's consistency or at least an affirmation or understanding of what we have differently than what you all have. And that's okay, because it doesn't need to be the same on a global basis.
There's a lot of apprehension around data. One is, when we look at data, especially around this, DEI conversations, it's pretty intimidating. And what I like to reassure organizations is we all have to start from somewhere. We're all starting from somewhere, right? I mean, otherwise we wouldn't need to do this work. So it's okay. This is not meant to, it's not meant to be a test to just highlight what we're doing wrong. It's really about where our potential lies. And, it's good to have a framework, a baseline, and something to compare to. So it's good to have a national average. If you're looking at distribution of race, well, what are the national averages in the United States, right? And so that becomes like a framework that you can use. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention about data, is that just like you have systems that are designed for compliance, for learning, a learning management system for learning and development, there are tools that are specific to this kind of data, like people analytics. So it's really important to not try to repurpose other tools and systems for this work. You want to use the appropriate systems that are going to support us in, actually being able to look at and assess the data in the right way. The last thing I was going to say about that also around data is that when we talk targets, the one thing I caution organizations to not do is post their targets on their website, right? Around DEI. Because we don't do that with any other aspect of our business.
Yeah. Why would we do it with this?
What that also does is that can set us up for failure as well. And I think I saw a lot of that, and I would actually consider that to be overreach as well, especially last year and the years prior. Like, you would go on many organizations' websites, they're like, we're going to have this much growth in diversity by blah, 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 blah. And they don't hit those targets, right? So that's another thing I like to caution organizations not to do.
The other thing, we were just talking about this with another guest the other day, and going with your business process analogy, when you look at the data, I feel it's important to not only focus on the outcomes data. It seems like everything is based on the outcomes data. We're talking quotas, we're talking targets, but how do you get there? What are the process metrics? And I think there, as you're looking at the data that you track, you also have to figure out those components of things, because like any business process, if you don't know how you got to the outcome, then how do you know how to improve the outcome? And so I think that has to be a component with everything else.
And that, absolutely, Dwight, I couldn't agree more. And that's what I was alluding to by referring to the intersectional data, because that tells the story of where we are, what's the issue. If the issue is that people are attriting the organization, right? Or certain gender or ethnicity or race or age, generation is attriting the organization, and we can't figure out why, right? We might see that as the outcome, but then when we start to look at the intersection of that data, we go, wait a minute, perhaps, we're looking at the data, we're seeing that in terms of promotion, this age group or this age range in this department isn't really getting promoted as fast as this other group. And perhaps there's something, we can start to dissect and start looking at things like performance reviews, right? Because that ultimately influences promotions. And we can look at salary and then start to figure out what the baseline salary is for these different demographics. That's what allows us to really start to tell the story and to start making changes, like slowly through strategy and implementation. So I couldn't agree more.
But that also provides a roadmap for being able to hold leaders accountable, right?
Yes.
So if you give them a roadmap, if you give them at least some understanding about what they have to do, whether it's engagement of those resources that you say are leaving, or they're not getting promoted, or there are people that we're not hiring.
Right.
You can give feedback to those leaders and say, hey, listen, your incentive, your increase, whatever it is being held to the fire on being able to be a better leader when it comes to DE&I. And that's not just us trying to be HR about it. This is a business problem, and you have to solve that business problem. And if you need help, we're here to help you. But that has to happen because, and this gets to our next topic. If DE&I can drive the business, it has to drive the business.
Right.
That's right.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
So, Martine, how does DE&I drive the business?
Yeah, it depends on what type of business it is, right? So, whether it's a B2B, B2C, government or not-for-profit, what we do know is that all organizations need revenue to thrive. How they get their revenue is what differentiates one organization from another. So the question becomes, what are those key performance indicators? What is the ROI, and how does DEI affect or impact any of those different elements? So at the end of the day, if it's a B2C business, what we know is that there's always opportunity to tap into new markets, always, right? Any organization that needs consumers to sell a product to, there are opportunities for new markets. I mean, all they need to do is literally compare themselves to other companies within that industry worldwide, and they will see that. So in order for us to drive the business in a B2C organization is really thinking about the representation that we have internally for our salespeople, because the salespeople have to have the awareness, you want the representation within the sales team or the product team so they can access these different markets, retain the markets, attract the markets. But then you also want to be able to tap into those markets with marketing, with branding, with all of those things. So that's how we can actually drive the business in a B2C type of organization. You look like you're going to say something.
Well, yeah, I am, because I love what you're talking about. But I think it goes also one step further, which is you can tell a story about who you are as a company to a consumer.
That's right.
And say, look, we're everybody. We serve all markets, but we're everybody. The people who make this product are you. We are you. We're, we have kids that go to your schools. We have people in your communities, and our representation of the people who make the product, who ship the product, who stock it on store shelves. We are you. If you can't say that because you are not diverse and you are not looking at your consumers as being us, then you are missing the point. And it's your point. No, I'm sorry. They are missing the point. You are accurate, but they're missing the point. That this is about you being you, meaning the company, being as representative of the people that you're serving as you can. Otherwise, you're missing it.
I couldn't agree more. And what I'm suggesting is that reason some organizations don't tap into even bigger markets and they don't know how to appeal to all of the customer bases because they don't have awareness. We don't know what we don't know, right? If I am a company with just Black women, right? I may not have the acknowledgement that I should target or that there is another group or community that might like my product. It just won't occur to me, right? So that's why I'm saying the first step is also having representation within my team, because that's the way I'm going to learn that there are all these other markets available to me. That's what I'm suggesting as a first step, because sometimes, the pushback I get from organizations is, well, we are tapping into markets. We don't know what we don't know. That's true. Same thing with recruiting. It's like, hey, we just can't get diverse talent. We've tried. It's like, well, you also have to think about who's actually doing the trying. If it's not reflective of what we're trying to target or who we're trying to target, then it won't change, right? So that's the business to consumer space. But when we think about business to business, we really rely on partnerships, right? A lot of it is the partners that we have. And so what we get to think about is who are our partners, right? There's opportunity for diversity within the group that's servicing and providing, corresponding with the partner so we can retain them as well, attract them. We still want to tap into new partnerships. There's always opportunity for that as well, right? And then we also want to think about our partners could actually be business to consumers, right? Like they have customers. So how do we support them in navigating and interacting with their customers? So there's benefit for us to have that representation and diversity within our organization and to perpetuate that even outside. And then lastly, when we think about like the government organizations or nonprofits, they rely on endowments, charity, all of that.
Yeah.
It's all about communities, right? The communities that these funders, are having access to or representing. So again, at the same time, at the end of the day, we want to be the employee base has to be representative of those communities, right? To attract those endowments, to attract those, the contributions that we get from those communities. And so at the end of the day, all of that, the common denominator is it's revenue, it's money that helps the business run. So I believe, and that's the approach I take. I think long gone are the days where we can say, DEI is the right thing to do because we want to retain our employees. We all know that. Like, of course, we want to keep our employees, but how does it tie back to the bottom line? And that's what we need to be able to communicate to the powers that be so that DEI is not just seen as like a nice to have, a fluffy thing, but it really is a business imperative.
Hey, are you listening to this and thinking to yourself, man, I wish I could talk to David about this? Well, you're in luck. We have a special offer for listeners of the HR Data Labs podcast, a free half-hour call with me about any of the topics we cover on the podcast or whatever is on your mind. Go to salary.com/HRDL consulting to schedule your free 30-minute call today. So Martine, I think the next logical step for people is how can they start getting prepared to get their data ready as well as get their organization ready to start seeing DE&I as a business strategy and prepare their leadership to start seeing it as a way in which they can grow their revenue?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say as far as the data, the first thing is to collect the information, the demographic data you have already. That's the very first thing, and start to look for consistencies across the board because sometimes, like I said, there's missing information. And, one of the things that can be done is through surveying, and, it's going to be on a voluntary basis, especially for, new employees. So not all this data we can't, mandate employees to, fill out and complete all the demographic data, especially when you're looking at organizations that are global. There's sometimes skepticism, curiosity, cynicism. So, but being able to explain the why and then, open it up to a survey of some sort. That's the first thing that we can do. The second is to then look at our costs, like at least lay out what you think the cost of DEI is going to look like. How much do you anticipate in terms of resources? Because we really do want to present this like any other business strategy. And with any other business strategy, you talk about the benefits, the costs, and, KPIs and so forth. So you look at that data, you look at the data in terms of the cost, and then you start to look at line by line, your KPIs or, the ROI, and start to think about and consider how diversity or representation can impact any of these pieces. And we just gave you some examples a few minutes ago around B2B or B2C organizations. So that's what we want to do. And now those are the first steps. And then I would say the fourth is being able to identify a platform that really is a people analytics tool, right? I've heard Tableau. I've heard there are a lot out there that you can try to sort of manipulate, but then there are, people analytics platforms that actually exist for this work. And it's worth looking into and adding that as part of your cost. So those are the steps in terms of data. And as far as strategy, the very first thing I'll suggest is go back and assess all of the DEI programs you have, because most organizations within the last 3 years started throwing out a bunch of programs. So review, lay them all out, and then start to really bucket them and figure out what's scalable, right? How are we not fully leveraging this initiative. For example, if we give funding to HBCUs or a philanthropic organization, how are we leveraging that, the HBCUs, when we're doing Black History Month? Like, could we leverage these HBCUs and some students to come in or what have you? If we're giving funding to an organization that is where we support women in STEM, well, during Women's History Month, are we repurposing the relationship? So that's what we get to do secondly. And then we start thinking about pipeline development and pipeline management that looks at recruiting and so forth.
I would also say that leveraging not just internships, because everybody talks about internships for which colleges. Yeah, okay, that's obvious. But I wanted to also talk about starting to focus your graduate programs. Where are you getting people who are just starting out in the workplace? Where are you getting those people from? And then start seeing also from their alumni networks too. There are a lot of people who go back to their colleges to say, hey, I'm out of work. Do you know of anything? And then being able to get great talent from these awesome institutions that have brilliant people who, they are people looking for roles they're going to the university. So why not tap the universities and say, hey, I'm looking for someone. Here's the job description, and being able to find rare talent by going back to the sources.
Absolutely. There's so many ways. There's so many ideas that we can use to source candidates, including conferences. What conferences are we going through? Like, what organizations, right? And then this actually brings me back to, I remember your first question that we couldn't remember before, which was, sometimes the positions, the open positions are at a higher level. Could we, create more entry level positions? That's part of pipeline development and pipeline management, is looking at, I had a client, commercial real estate company, and they were like, we only bring people in at this level. They have to have a graduate education. They have to have an MBA. And my pushback was, let's revisit this again. You mean to tell me we couldn't create a position where we can convert interns who graduate, your previous interns who eventually graduate college, to come into a role? You're telling me there are no positions. And after a lot of evaluation, there were. We were able to establish that. Yeah. So that's part of that pipeline development. And like you said, when you're starting to tap into and leveraging, employees who have access to different networks, we also want to be able to convert them, and we want to be able to open up and create more entry level positions. But it's just as important to also make sure that the pipeline management, right? Because we can have a whole lot of concentrated diversity at the entry level, but if you look at the senior level and it's not, and it's homogenous, then it's not going to work, right? So we really want to think about the promotion, what that process is, and are we mitigating bias in that process of promoting people, looking at salary bands, etc. So those are critical components of the process as well.
So we mentioned this on a podcast the other day, Dwight, so you don't laugh when I say this, but it's really awful when you try and hire someone and they look at your About Us page and they just see white faces. What kind of message are you sending that the leadership of the organization doesn't look like you?
Absolutely.
Are you going to get promotional opportunities to be able to get there? No. And so what I've been espousing is that if you're trying to start your path on diversity and your About Us page doesn't look like the group that you're going to go after, you're going to have a hard time convincing people that they're going to be able to get there. And maybe you should start thinking about who you are as an organization and how you want to represent yourself differently. And it's not just about having a diverse picture on your career site. It's not going to help. It has to be starting from the top.
That's right.
And so whether you have a diverse board and you want to put pictures of the people on your board, hire people in leadership that are diverse. How about that? And start from that.
It's defining what diversity means, right? What does it mean to the organization? Right. What does that mean, right? Because diversity could mean one or multiple things. And, having one of a person isn't enough, right? And so we want to look at that. And I do agree with you. I cringe when I go on websites and I see lack of diversity, but I also cringe when I go on websites of organizations and I see a whole lot of diversity. And then you actually interact with the organization, it's the exact opposite. So there's a difference between you being aspirational versus being performative, right? And so we just want to be careful because people are really, really smart. And, especially in this economy, people scrutinize and scrub everything. Our Gen Zers and our millennials are looking at all of this. They're going to be at the forefront and driving organizations in just a few years. So they're looking at all this stuff. So we don't want to be performative when we have images as well. We want to make sure that we're working towards it and we have a statement, a diet that backs it up. And then we have plans of action. That's what people are looking for. And looking at having diversity concentrated at just one level, that entry level, is not going to be sufficient, right? So when I think people are looking at, well, what's the representation on your senior leadership? What's the representation at that board level, right? So those are just as important as, that entry level initiative of representation.
Absolutely. Martine, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's over? It's going so fast.
It's over. It's only just begun.
We've been recording for almost 40 minutes now, but no. I wanted to ask you, is there anything else you wanted to bring up before we close?
No, I think that we covered the gamuts. I'm really satisfied with this conversation because I don't feel that people really explore and have, discussion around this, the data. They just don't understand it. And, I think a lot of DEI thought leaders glance over it and they focus on this is, the right thing to do. It's about emotional intelligence, it's about social awareness, and it is all those things. But it has to also be about this.
Excellent. Well, we've been saying from the very beginning of this podcast that if you can't measure it and you can't keep track of it and you can't focus on it, then you're not going to be able successful to try and achieve anything. So that's why the HR Data Labs podcast exists, is to try and help raise awareness for people about the power that data has in being able to not just drive HR.
Yeah.
We're not talking about driving HR here. We're talking about driving the business. So your topic and your passion about it is laudable, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining. And I'm sure we could find at least one more topic to bring you back on, if you don't mind.
I would love it. Absolutely. I think that there's even more around data that we could talk about later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Dwight.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Martine. Appreciate you being here with us. This has been fascinating.
Yeah, this was fun.
Everybody, thank you very much. Take care and stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.